Before we begin, if you love dark horror stories about ancient curses, twisted legends, and chilling confessions like this, make sure to like this video, comment your thoughts or theories below, and subscribe for more terrifying creepypasta stories every single week. Your support helps keep these nightmares alive. We rolled into the town of Marrows and just before dusk, with the last streaks of gold fading behind the jagged treetops. Our car rattled along the gravel road that skirted the river, tires spitting pebbles into the endless grass. I remember how the river looked then, wide and dark and silent, like a sleeping giant waiting for a reason to wake up. There were 5 of us that weekend. Me, Tyler, and our friends Jake, Mandy, and Brielle. We'd been planning this camping trip for weeks, wanting to escape the city heat and spend a couple of nights by the famous Marrow River before summer ended. Tyler was my boyfriend, quiet and careful about everything. Jake was the loud one, the type who always had a beer cracked open before noon. Mandy and Brielle had been best friends since kindergarten, practically inseparable. I'd known them all since high school, but something about this trip felt heavier than any of us expected. We pulled up to the small general store near the river's edge to grab some extra firewood and snacks before heading to the cabin we rented. As soon as we stepped out, a thick hush fell over the street. An old woman was sweeping her porch across the road, but she stopped, her eyes fixed on us with something between pity and anger. Her hair was thin and white, tied back with fraying blue ribbon, and her lips moved soundlessly as if reciting a prayer or curse. Inside the store the air was stale and cold. The man behind the counter was pale and bony, with deep lines around his mouth that made him look like he'd spent a lifetime frowning. As Tyler paid for the firewood, the man's eyes darted to each of us before settling back on Tyler. "You kids camping by the river?" His voice was flat, neither friendly nor hostile, but something about it made my stomach tighten. Jake laughed. "Yeah, just for the weekend. Got ourselves a nice little cabin by the east bank. Hopefully catch some fish or at least get drunk enough not to care." The man didn't smile. His eyes lingered on Jake for a long moment before he spoke again. "Don't stay by the river after sundown," he said quietly, leaning forward as if he didn't want anyone else to hear. "And if you hear singing, don't answer." Mandy chuckled nervously. "Singing? What do you mean? Like frogs or?" The man's gaze shifted to her, then back to Tyler. "The river wives," he said. "Don't speak to them. Don't even look for them." We all waited for him to continue, expecting a punchline or at least a smirk that meant it was some local ghost story told to scare outsiders. But he said nothing more, just turned away and began unpacking cartons of canned beans onto the shelves, his shoulders sagging under an invisible weight. Back in the car, Jake was the first to break the silence. "River wives? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. They just don't want us city folks messing around with their fishing spots." "Still," Tyler said, his voice unusually tight, "maybe we shouldn't go swimming at night." I sat in the passenger seat, staring out at the river that snaked alongside the road, half hidden behind thick curtains of reeds and drooping willow branches. The sun had nearly set now, and the river seemed to swallow the last of its light. A creeping unease settled over me like a damp blanket. I couldn't shake the memory of the old woman's lips moving silently as we passed. The cabin sat alone at the river bend, a squat structure of gray wood with a small porch sagging towards the grass. Its windows reflected the river like empty eyes. Inside it smelled of pine, mildew, and old books. We unloaded our gear quickly, eager to set up the bonfire before full dark. As the others chopped wood, I sat on the back steps scrolling through my phone. Curiosity gnawed at me, so I typed in Marrows and River Wives, and waited as the signal strained to load. Finally, an old blog post appeared, the letters flickering on my cracked screen. It told the story of brides drowned by the town elders centuries ago, thrown into the river as offerings to calm a devastating flood. Their spirits, betrayed and enraged, never left. They became the river wives, vengeful brides with songs that lured men to their deaths, dragging them beneath the black waters to become their eternal husbands. The wind rustled the trees above me, cool against my skin. I swallowed, feeling the rising thump of my heartbeat. "Hey, you guys ever hear about why they call them river wives?" I asked. Jake rolled his eyes. "Oh God, here we go." "No, really," I said, reading aloud about the offerings, the singing, the disappearances over the decades. Mandy shivered and tossed another log onto the fire. "That's disgusting," Brielle said quietly. "Why would anyone think murder was an acceptable offering?" "Because people are stupid," Tyler replied. "And desperate." By nightfall, the bonfire was roaring, orange flames licking up towards the moonless sky. We roasted marshmallows and drank cheap whiskey, telling dumb stories about old teachers and humiliating high school moments. The night felt almost normal again, the warmth of the fire making us drowsy and careless. But then the wind died. The trees stood motionless, their branches clawing at the still air like frozen hands. I felt it before I heard it, a vibration beneath my feet, deep in the earth, like the rumble of an oncoming train far away. Then came the singing. It was faint at first, a distant chorus floating over the water. Soft, melodic, sad beyond anything I'd ever heard. It wound its way through the trees and around our little circle of firelight, brushing against my ears like cold silk. My breath hitched in my throat as I turned towards the river. No one else seemed to notice. Tyler was poking at the embers with a stick, Jake was busy draining the last of his bottle, and Mandy and Brielle were laughing at something on Mandy's phone. But I sat there, frozen, listening to that eerie music curling up from the black water like a beckoning hand. Then, through the smoke and darkness, I heard it. My name, whispered in a voice as gentle as falling rain. I blinked hard, staring at the river. The surface was smooth and glassy, reflecting the faint glow of the firelight. But between the reeds something shifted. A pale shape, a hint of white skin under the black water, hair drifting in the current like weeds. "Did you hear that?" I whispered. No one answered. My voice sounded small and useless against the night's vast silence. The singing grew clearer, winding around my name again and again, each syllable soft and pleading. My body moved before my mind could stop it. I stood and stepped away from the fire, drawn towards the riverbank, feet crunching over dry grass and brittle twigs. The scent of algae and mud thickened in my nose as I pushed through the reeds, my heartbeat drumming in my ears so loud it drowned out everything else. At the water's edge I saw her. She stood waist-deep in the river, her skin glowing silver under the scattered starlight, hair floating around her like a halo of ink. Her eyes were black from lid to lid, shining like polished stones. She smiled at me with a mouth too wide for her face, filled with rows of tiny needle-sharp teeth. But her voice was beautiful. "Come to me," she whispered. Her words wrapped around my mind like warm hands, soft and urgent. "Please. I've waited so long for you." Behind me someone shouted my name. Tyler's voice, sharp with fear, snapped the spell's thread. I stumbled back, almost falling into the mud. The woman didn't move. Her smile widened, her teeth glinting in the moonlight. I ran, crashing through the reeds, gasping as I reached the fire. Everyone was staring at me, eyes wide, mouths open. "Who the hell were you talking to?" Mandy asked, her voice trembling. I couldn't answer. I just sat there, staring into the dark beyond the trees, listening to the last fading notes of her song curling through the night like smoke. And somewhere beyond the river, hidden among the drifting fog, I saw the old woman standing by the road again, her blue ribbon fluttering in the stillness, her mouth moving silently with words I could not hear. The singing stopped. But the silence it left behind felt heavier than death. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face under the water, pale and luminous with that awful smile slicing through the shadows. Her song coiled in my mind like a parasite, echoing in the silent dark between each heartbeat. At dawn, I sat alone on the back steps, staring out at the river where silver mist drifted above the surface. My friends moved quietly inside the cabin, avoiding my eyes as they packed away sleeping bags and empty bottles. Tyler came out and sat beside me, his hand brushing against mine. "You okay?" he asked, his voice hoarse. I nodded, though my chest felt hollow. "She called my name," I whispered. He exhaled sharply, looking towards the river. "Don't tell Jake. He already thinks you're messing with him." Jake appeared in the doorway then, rubbing sleep from his bloodshot eyes, beer already dangling from his fingertips. "What's the plan for today?" he yawned. "Fishing? Swimming? Or are we sitting here being scared of river ghosts?" "No swimming," Tyler said flatly. Jake rolled his eyes and took a long swig. "Fine, Grandpa." We spent the morning fishing from the dock. The river lay glass still under the rising sun, reflecting the heavy clouds drifting overhead. I kept scanning the reeds on the opposite bank, expecting to see her white figure standing among the shadows. But there was nothing, only swaying grass and the silent drift of water beetles skating across the surface. Around noon, Jake wandered off to relieve himself behind the trees. He was gone longer than usual. When he finally returned, his face was flushed with excitement. "You guys gotta see this," he said. "There's a deer carcass upriver. Or something. Come on." Mandy shook her head. "Gross, no. Just tell the ranger." But curiosity gnawed at me. I followed him, Tyler trailing close behind. We trudged through brambles and tangled undergrowth until we reached a small inlet choked with reeds. The smell hit me first, rot and algae, a sickly sweet stench that clung to my tongue. Something pale floated in the shallows. At first I thought it was just another dead fish bloated with decay, but as we stepped closer, I saw strands of long black hair fanned out in the water like drifting riverweed. Beneath it, a gray-white face stared up at us with empty black sockets for eyes, its mouth gaping wide in a silent scream. I stumbled back, clutching Tyler's arm to keep from falling. Jake crouched beside the corpse, frowning. "Is it a person?" he asked, poking it with a stick. The head rolled slightly, revealing a long gash down its throat that yawned open like a second mouth. Its lips were torn and shriveled, peeling away to expose tiny needle-like teeth. Tyler grabbed Jake's shoulder and yanked him back. "Don't touch it. We need to call someone." But before we could move, the corpse twitched. I thought my eyes were lying. The body jerked once, twice, then began to rise from the water, hair sliding down its shoulders in wet black ropes. The smell intensified, suffocating and sweet, as its head turned towards us with a wet crackle of bone. Its mouth spread into a wide, impossible smile. Jake screamed. It wasn't a yell of surprise or drunken bravado this time. It was pure terror ripped from his lungs like something alive. The creature's eyes opened, black as tar, gleaming with hunger. "Hello, Jake," it rasped. His screams choked off instantly. His eyes glazed over, his body going slack as he dropped his stick. The creature's arms shot out of the water, impossibly long and thin, skin clinging to bone. Its hands latched onto his ankles and yanked him forward. He didn't struggle. He didn't even blink. His feet slipped across the mud as if he'd forgotten how to walk, his eyes locked on hers with a vacant devotion. "Jake, stop!" I shouted, lunging for him, but Tyler grabbed me around the waist, hauling me back with surprising force. My nails scraped through the mud as I fought him, but he wouldn't let go. "Don't!" he yelled into my ear. "Don't touch him. Don't touch her." Jake stepped into the river. The water lapped up his shins, his thighs, soaking his jeans dark. The creature's smile widened further, splitting her cheeks until they nearly tore. Her hands slid up his body, curling around his waist, pulling him into her chest. His head fell back, eyes rolling up into his skull as her mouth descended onto his throat. The water swallowed them both in a single fluid motion, leaving only widening ripples that rocked against the reeds. Silence. The birds had stopped singing. Even the wind had died. Tyler released me and I fell forward into the mud, retching bile and whiskey onto the black earth. He knelt beside me, his hands trembling as they hovered above my back, unsure whether to comfort me or keep his distance. "We need to leave," he whispered. "Right now." We stumbled back to camp in silence, our breaths ragged and broken. Mandy and Brielle were waiting by the fire pit, their faces pale with confusion. "Where's Jake?" Mandy asked. I tried to speak, but my lips wouldn't form words. Tyler shook his head once. "We have to go. Get your stuff." They stared at him, uncomprehending. "Go? Go where?" "The police," he snapped. "We need to report him missing." Brielle's eyes filled with tears. "Missing? What happened? Tell me what happened." But I couldn't tell them. I couldn't tell them that Jake was gone, that he'd been claimed by something ancient and foul beneath the black water. Even if I had, I knew they wouldn't have believed it. The drive to town was silent except for Brielle's muffled sobs in the back seat. We went straight to the sheriff's office, a squat brick building near the old church. The sheriff himself took our statement, scribbling notes with bored precision as Tyler recounted what we'd seen. "You're saying he walked into the river and didn't come back up?" he asked, his eyes flicking over us with mild annoyance. Tyler clenched his jaw. "She pulled him under." "Who pulled him under?" The sheriff set down his pen. Tyler hesitated. "The woman." The sheriff leaned back in his chair and sighed. "Look, this river has strong undertow currents. If he was drinking, he probably slipped and got sucked under. We'll send divers in the morning. But I'll be honest, son, we rarely recover anyone intact if they go missing overnight. I suggest you kids head home." "That's it." Mandy's voice cracked. "You're just going to leave him in there?" "We'll search at dawn," he repeated, already turning back to his paperwork. "That's all we can do." Outside, the air felt heavy with heat and grief. Brielle collapsed onto the sidewalk, sobbing into her hands as Mandy tried to comfort her. Tyler stared out at the horizon, his shoulders slumped, eyes vacant. I turned towards the road leading back to the river. At the far end, beside a sagging telephone pole, stood the old woman from the store. Her blue ribbon fluttered in the stagnant breeze as she watched us. When our eyes met, she shook her head slowly, her lips moving in silent words I could not hear. I wanted to run to her, to scream at her for answers, but my legs refused to move. The sun was setting behind her, staining the sky with streaks of crimson and orange, and for a moment she seemed to glow with that same pale light as the river wife in the water. She turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving only the empty road and the sound of Brielle's sobs echoing off the hot pavement. Tyler placed a hand on my shoulder, but I barely felt it. My mind was still at the river, replaying Jake's final moment over and over, the slack devotion in his eyes, the way her teeth gleamed as they sank into his throat. That night, back at the cabin, I lay awake listening to the river sing beyond the window glass. Soft, sweet notes curling through the dark, winding around my name with desperate tenderness. I pressed my hands over my ears and squeezed my eyes shut, but her voice slipped between my fingers like water. She was calling me again. And next time, I didn't know if I'd be strong enough to say no. The dawn came in gray and heavy, the sky swollen with unspent rain. We left the cabin early, unable to bear another minute under its sagging beams. The air outside was damp and silent, the river shrouded in mist that curled across the banks like drifting souls. Brielle clung to Mandy's arm, her eyes red-rimmed and unfocused. Tyler barely spoke, his movements stiff and mechanical as he loaded our gear into the trunk. We waited near the boat ramp while the sheriff's divers suited up and prepared their lines. They moved slowly, deliberately, like men with no hope of success. One diver adjusted his mask and glanced up at us, his eyes dull and incurious. I wondered how many drowned faces he had seen in this river. I wondered if he would see Jake's today. They slid into the water without a splash and vanished beneath the surface, their air tanks hissing in the hushed morning. Minutes passed, then an hour, then two. Mandy sat on the tailgate, rocking back and forth, murmuring prayers under her breath. Tyler paced the gravel lot, arms folded tight across his chest. Brielle simply stared out at the river, unblinking. At noon, the divers emerged empty-handed. The sheriff shook his head as he approached us, his eyes fixed somewhere beyond our group, unwilling to settle on any of our faces. "I'm sorry," he said. "There's no sign of him. Current's too strong down there. He's gone. Gone." The word was too small for what had happened. It didn't hold the horror of watching him walk willingly into her arms or the echo of his scream as the water closed over his head. It didn't describe the silence that swallowed us afterwards, leaving only the river wife's song curling through the reeds. The sheriff turned away, already speaking into his radio, dismissing us as easily as he would a weather report. I watched him walk back to his cruiser, rage simmering beneath my skin like acid. Tyler touched my arm gently. "Come on," he said. "Let's go back to the cabin. We need to pack the rest." I pulled away. "No. I'm not leaving him here." He blinked, confusion flickering across his face. "There's nothing else we can do." I looked past him towards the woods that lined the road out of town. Between the black trunks and dripping branches, I saw a flicker of blue ribbon disappearing into the shadows. My chest tightened with sudden, violent hope. "There is someone who knows," I said, my voice trembling. "I saw her again." "Who?" he asked, but I was already moving, stepping off the gravel and onto the slick, mossy earth beneath the trees. The old woman's trail wound deeper into the forest, away from the river's hush. Wet leaves clung to my shoes. Branches snatched at my sleeves with thorny fingers. The others called my name behind me, but their voices felt thin and far away, muffled by the thick hush that pressed against my ears. After what felt like hours, I saw her cabin. It sat half-sunk among roots and mud, its roof sagging under the weight of wet moss. Iron wind chimes hung from the porch beams, clinking dully in the still air. Salt lines traced the window frames. Bundles of dried herbs and river reeds dangled from nails beside the door, their scent sharp and earthy. She sat on a rocking chair near the threshold, her thin body wrapped in a gray shawl. Her eyes flicked up as I approached, black and bright as crow feathers. "You came sooner than I expected," she rasped, her voice as rough as water over stones. "Please," I said, my throat tight. "You know about them. You know what took him." Her eyes narrowed. "You heard their song, didn't you?" I nodded. My hands trembled at my sides. She sighed, rocking back and forth, the chair creaking softly under her weight. The river wives were not always demons. Once they were brides. I swallowed, the taste of bile rising in my throat. "Brides?" "Centuries ago," she said, her gaze drifting to the trees beyond me, "when this town was still a cluster of shacks and dirt roads, the river flooded year after year. Crops drowned, children swept away in the night. The elders grew desperate. They believed the river had a spirit, a god of black water and silt. To appease him they chose offerings. My skin prickled with cold. Offerings? Brides? She whispered. Young women, dressed in white lace and crowned with reeds. They were taken to the water's edge at dawn. The priest would bless them and push them under. They believed their deaths would calm the god's wrath. My stomach turned. I pictured their faces, pale and terrified, as the muddy water swallowed their screams. But it didn't stop the floods, she continued. The river god never wanted their lives. And so their souls became twisted with grief and rage, trapped beneath the black currents. They became the river wives, luring men to replace the husbands they never had. I clenched my hands into fists, nails biting into my palms. How do I stop them? How do I get him back? She shook her head slowly. You cannot get him back. The river keeps what it claims. I stepped forward, my voice cracking. Then tell me how to fight them. Her dark eyes fixed on mine, ancient and sharp. She reached into the folds of her shawl and pulled out a thin chain of black iron, the metal rusted and pitted with age. Wear this, she said, pressing it into my trembling hand. Iron is older than they are. It will keep them from touching your flesh. But it will not keep them from your mind. I curled my fingers around the cold weight of it. Is there anything else? She leaned forward, her breath sour with herbs and smoke. Do not speak to them. Do not let them know your name. Names hold power in the water. I nodded, tears spilling down my cheeks. Thank you. She turned her gaze away, staring into the darkened trees as if I were already gone. Don't thank me, she whispered. Pray they never want you the way they wanted him. I walked back to the cabin in silence, the iron pendant clutched tight in my fist. Tyler met me halfway down the trail, his face pale and drawn. Where did you go? He demanded, grabbing my shoulders. To someone who knows the truth, I said. We need to leave. Now. He looked into my eyes and saw the resolve there. Without a word, he turned and led me back to the others. Mandy and Brielle were already loading the last of our bags into the car. Brielle wouldn't look at me, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. We drove out of Marrow's End as the first drops of rain fell, smearing the dusty windshield into watery streaks. Behind us, the river disappeared into the trees, silent and still. But I felt its eyes on me, cold and unblinking, watching as we fled. Tyler reached over and squeezed my hand. His fingers were clammy with sweat. We'll call his parents when we get home, he said quietly. I nodded, staring straight ahead. My pulse throbbed in my throat with every beat. Because as we left that cursed place, I realized something with a sudden, sickening certainty. When Jake had been pulled under, screaming my name, he had given it to them. And now they knew it. We didn't drive straight home. We made it halfway to the highway before Tyler pulled the car onto the shoulder, turned off the engine, and buried his face in his hands. The sudden silence felt enormous after hours of tires on gravel. Rain drummed softly against the roof. Beside him, I sat clutching the iron pendant so tightly it left grooves in my palm. We can't leave him there, he whispered, his voice breaking. Mandy shifted in the back seat, her eyes swollen and red. What choice do we have, Tyler? He's gone. They said he's gone. No, he growled, lifting his head, his eyes wild with rage and grief. He's not gone. He's down there. He's trapped with those things. Brielle shivered violently. Please stop talking about it. Please. I can still hear her singing when I close my eyes. I swallowed hard, tasting bile. The old woman said they can't touch me if I wear the iron. If I go back. Absolutely not, Tyler snapped. You think you're immune because of some rusty necklace? Did you see what she did to Jake? I turned to him, my voice trembling but unbreakable. If we leave now, they'll keep calling. They'll keep taking. Jake is gone because we didn't listen. I won't let that happen again. He stared at me for a long moment, rainwater streaking down the windshield between us, refracting his eyes into broken slivers of gray and gold. Finally he nodded. Mandy sobbed in the back seat, pressing her fists to her temples. We're all going to die. We're all going to die down there. No, I said quietly. Not if I go alone. The drive back to Marrow's End was silent. The town was emptier than before, if that was possible. The store was closed, its windows boarded from the inside. The streets glistened with rain under a bruised purple sky. As we passed the old woman's house, I saw her silhouette framed in the window, her hands pressed flat against the glass as if in prayer or mourning. At the cabin we packed only what we needed, the iron pendant, a length of thick rope, and Tyler's hunting knife. He strapped the blade to his belt with shaking hands. Brielle refused to get out of the car. Mandy sat on the porch steps, her head bowed, whispering prayers that sounded like apologies. We walked to the river as dusk fell, the last thin light staining the water's surface in streaks of dying gold. The mist was thicker now, rolling across the banks in slow, choking waves. I tied the rope around my waist, handed the other end to Tyler, and fastened the iron pendant around my neck. Its cold weight settled over my sternum like a brand. "Don't let go," I told him. His eyes filled with tears. "I won't." The singing began as soon as I stepped past the tree line. It rose from the water like steam, curling around my ears in layered harmony, dozens of voices braiding into a melody so beautiful it ached. My knees trembled. My vision blurred with tears. I felt the rope tighten behind me as I stumbled forward, the song pulling at my bones like a tide. Through the mist I saw them. There were 3 tonight, rising waist-deep from the river's black glass. Their hair floated around them like drifting kelp. Their eyes glowed faintly in the gloom, featureless and dark, their smiles stretched wide enough to split their cheeks. Water streamed down their bare shoulders, rippling with every breath. "Come to us," they whispered in unison, their voices woven together in perfect, awful harmony. "We've been waiting for you." I clenched the pendant until it cut into my palm. "Let him go," I said, my voice cracking. "Take me instead." They cocked their heads in eerie synchrony, their smiles fading into something colder, hungrier. The tallest one stepped forward, her long hair slithering around her breasts like living shadows. "You offer yourself so willingly," she purred. "Why?" "Because you've already taken everything else," I said, tasting salt as tears slipped down my face. "Because he didn't deserve to die." Her smile returned, sharper this time. "No one deserves death," she whispered. "Yet everyone belongs to us eventually." Another moved closer, her submerged hands lifting to reveal long eel-thin fingers tipped with bone-white claws. "We do not bargain," she sang, her voice trembling with laughter. "We take what we desire. And you, we desire you most of all." Behind me the rope tightened again as Tyler pulled, sensing danger. The iron pendant grew warm against my skin, and for a moment their smiles faltered. The tallest hissed softly, her teeth clicking together like pebbles under a rushing stream. "You think old iron will save you?" she asked, tilting her head so her black eyes reflected the last dying light. "It may shield your flesh, but your mind is still ours." The song rose again, louder now, wrapping around my skull in a suffocating coil. My vision swam. The mist thickened into darkness. The river vanished beneath my feet. Suddenly I was standing underwater, suspended in endless black, weightless and cold. Around me their forms drifted, no longer beautiful or human. Their faces sagged with rot, cheeks peeling away to reveal bone and tendon beneath. Their teeth jutted out like broken needles from gaping mouths. Their hair twisted around me like seaweed, tightening around my chest, my arms, my throat. I tried to scream, but the water filled my mouth, thick and bitter with decay. I saw Jake floating beside me, his eyes cloudy and unseeing, his limbs limp and drifting like a dead marionette. His skin was mottled gray, his lips tinged blue. His chest rose and fell with silent sobs that never escaped his lungs. The tallest river wife drifted closer, her ruined face inches from mine. Her eyes bled black tears into the water, her mouth splitting wider to reveal rows upon rows of jagged teeth spiraling into darkness. "You are ours," she whispered, her words vibrating through the water and into my bones. "Husband." I reached for the pendant around my neck, but my fingers were numb and clumsy. The iron glowed faintly, flickering like a dying star. Her hands cupped my face, her nails biting into my jaw. Behind her, the darkness shifted. A light. It glowed faintly, wavering like a candle flame, but it was enough. Tyler's voice cut through the water, muffled and distant, but filled with desperate rage. "Let him go," he screamed. The rope around my waist snapped taut. Pain shot through my abdomen as I was yanked backwards. The river wife's nails tore down my throat, ripping skin as I slipped from her grasp. The water roared around me. The singing turned into a shriek of fury so loud it rattled my teeth. My head broke the surface. Air exploded into my lungs, mixing with blood and river water as I gasped. Tyler was on the shore, digging his heels into the mud as he pulled with all his strength. The mist writhed around me, clutching at my shoulders with icy fingers. Behind me, I heard them screaming, their voices mingled into one shrill note of hatred. The next thing I knew, I was sprawled on the bank, coughing up black water onto the grass. Tyler fell to his knees beside me, grabbing my shoulders, his tears falling hot on my cheeks. "Don't ever do that again," he sobbed, shaking me. "Don't you ever do that again." I lay back, staring up at the black sky, feeling the iron pendant burn against my chest. The singing had stopped, but in its absence, A new silence had settled over the river. It felt like the silence before a storm. And deep down I knew this wasn't over. We left Marrow's End at dawn, the rising sun burning the fog off the river in slow, swirling tendrils. The air smelled of wet earth and rotting reeds. As Tyler drove, his hands clenched around the wheel so hard his knuckles whitened. I sat silently beside him, my skin still burning where the river wife's claws had raked my throat. Mandy and Brielle didn't speak. Brielle stared out the window with empty eyes, her cheek pressed against the glass as tears slid down her nose. Mandy's lips moved silently, whispering prayers or apologies to gods that had long abandoned this place. I closed my eyes, trying to force myself back into my body. Every time I blinked, I saw Jake drifting beneath the river, his limbs floating in the black, his eyes blank and silent. Every time I inhaled, I tasted the river wife's song, coppery and sweet, curling around my tongue like poison. Tyler reached over, his thumb brushing against my raw throat. His touch was feather-light, but it sent pain flashing behind my eyes. I flinched. He pulled his hand back, staring at his trembling fingers as if they were foreign objects. Do you think they'll follow us?" he asked. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because I could feel them even now, far behind us, still watching. Still waiting. The next few days passed in a blur. We returned to the city and tried to slot ourselves back into normal life, but the seams never held. Jake's parents called over and over, their voices cracking with grief and disbelief, demanding answers we could never give them. Brielle stopped coming to class, locking herself in her apartment until her parents drove down to take her home. Mandy barely spoke, her eyes distant and gray, as if part of her mind was still trapped on that riverbank. Tyler stayed with me every night, sleeping on my floor. Sometimes in the early hours of morning, I would wake to find him sitting upright in the dark, staring at nothing, his eyes reflecting the pale blue light from the street lamps outside. A week after we returned, I found the old iron pendant in my pocket. Its surface was tarnished and cracked from the river wife's claws. When I held it, my chest tightened with a suffocating dread, as if unseen fingers were curling around my ribs. That night I dreamed of them. They stood in the river, waist deep, their hair drifting around them like ink in water. Their eyes were pits of darkness, their teeth glinting in wide, jagged smiles. And behind them, half submerged in the black current, was Jake. His skin was blue-gray, his lips torn open in a silent scream, his eyes staring straight into mine. "Come home," they whispered in unison, their voices harmonizing into that same irresistible melody. "We miss you." When I woke, my sheets were wet with sweat. Tyler was gone. His sleeping bag lay empty on the floor, cold to the touch. Panic exploded in my chest as I scrambled out of bed, nearly slipping on the tangled blankets. I found him in the bathroom, sitting on the closed toilet lid, his phone in his lap. His face was pale and damp with tears. He didn't look up when I entered. "They called again?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "His mom. She asked what his last words were." My stomach clenched. I knelt in front of him, my hands gripping his knees. "What did you say?" He shook his head, tears dripping onto his jeans. I told her I didn't hear them. We sat in silence, the bathroom fan buzzing faintly above us. Outside, the world moved on as if nothing had changed. But for us, everything was broken. That night, the river wives came again. I heard their singing before sleep took me. It seeped into the edges of my mind, soft and insistent, coiling around my thoughts like smoke. I tried to fight it, clutching the iron pendant in my fist until the edges cut into my skin, but the song kept weaving deeper. When I opened my eyes, I was standing on the riverbank. Mist rolled over the water, glowing faintly under the silver moon. The air smelled of algae and rotting wood. My feet were bare, the mud cold between my toes. The singing swelled around me, beautiful and endless. Across the river stood the tallest of them, her pale body slick with water, hair drifting across her breasts like dark silk. Her mouth curved into a tender smile that didn't reach her black, depthless eyes. "You came back," she whispered. I shook my head, tears blurring my vision. "I didn't want to." "But you did," she purred. "You belong here. With us." Behind her, the other wives rose from the water, their faces shadowed, their hair drifting in the current. And among them, half submerged and limp, was Jake. His eyes rolled in their sockets, fixing on mine with silent, pleading agony. I stepped forward, my heart pounding so violently I thought my ribs would shatter. "Let him go," I begged. "Please. Take me instead. Just let him go." The river wife tilted her head, her smile fading into something colder. "You still don't understand," she whispered. Her hands rose from the water, long and thin and gray, fingers ending in knife-sharp claws. She placed them gently on Jake's shoulders, her nails pricking into his dead flesh. He didn't move. He didn't even blink. "He is ours," she said softly. "As you will be. As all things are in time." I screamed, lunging forward, but the water rose around me like a living thing, grabbing my ankles, my thighs, my chest, pulling me down into the freezing darkness. Her face loomed above me, her eyes glowing like coals in the void. "Sing with us," she whispered. I woke to Tyler shaking me violently, his hands gripping my shoulders hard enough to bruise. My throat burned from screaming. The iron pendant lay twisted and broken in my fist, its link snapped clean through. "What happened?" he demanded, his voice shaking with terror. "What did you see?" I couldn't speak. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I clutched his shirt, burying my face in his chest. He held me for hours, rocking back and forth on my bedroom floor as dawn crept through the curtains. We never spoke of Marrow's End again. A month later, Tyler moved back home to live with his parents. Mandy transferred to another university across the state. Brielle stopped answering her phone. I stayed behind, finishing my classes in silence, drifting through days that felt longer and darker with every passing hour. Sometimes, when the night is quiet and the wind rattles the windows, I hear them calling from the river that winds through the city. Their voices weave through the dark, singing my name with desperate, aching sweetness. And sometimes, in the spaces between sleep and waking, I hear another voice among them, softer and familiar, broken by the water's weight. It's Jake, begging me to come home. And I know that one day, when my mind is too tired to keep fighting, when the iron of my will finally rusts away to nothing, I will answer them. Because the river wives never forget. They wait, they watch, and they sing.